The winter of 1944 in Europe was brutally cold, so cold it became a second enemy for soldiers in the Battle of the Bulge. The snow fell relentlessly, blanketing the forests and fields in a thick, icy shroud. For many, the bitter wind was as dangerous as any bullet or shell, cutting through uniforms and chilling bones to the core. Huddled in foxholes, their wool coats and leather boots offered little protection as temperatures plunged. Soldiers pressed close together, trying to share what little warmth they could muster, but the cold was merciless, seeping into every crevice and joint. The gear, designed for ordinary winters, failed catastrophically in these extreme conditions. Uniforms that had served well in milder climates now became liabilities, trapping moisture and offering scant insulation against the relentless freeze. Wool lost its warmth when compressed or wet, and leather boots froze, leading to frostbite and trench foot. Every step became agony, and every night brought the risk of losing fingers or toes to the cold. Soldiers quickly realized their issued equipment could be as dangerous as enemy fire. The threat was silent, invisible, and ever-present, gnawing away at morale and strength. The cold seeped through every layer, numbing limbs and minds, claiming fingers and toes with frostbite, and sapping the will to fight. Some men found themselves unable to hold their rifles, their hands too stiff and swollen to grip. Survival demanded more than strength or firepower, it required ingenuity. The men had to think beyond their training, inventing new ways to keep warm and stay alive. Veterans learned to see opportunity in the ruins. Newspapers, branches, even trash became tools for warmth. Anything that could trap heat or block the wind was pressed into service, no matter how humble or unlikely. They improvised, using whatever they could find to fight the cold. Some stuffed their boots with paper, others wrapped themselves in extra fabric or scavenged blankets, always searching for a little more comfort. This was a war fought on two fronts, and the battle against the elements required a new kind of knowledge. The enemy was not just across the line, it was all around, in the air, the snow, the biting wind. The smartest, not just the strongest, survived. Those who adapted, who shared tips and resources, stood a better chance of making it through the night. They adapted, turning debris into lifelines. Broken crates, shattered doors, and even enemy equipment were repurposed to build makeshift shelters and windbreaks. In the end, victory over the cold came from resourcefulness, not regulation. The men who survived did so by outsmarting the winter, not just enduring it. The front lines became a classroom in survival, where necessity drove innovation, and every lesson learned was paid for in blood and frostbite. To beat the cold, soldiers had to understand why they were freezing. It wasn't just the biting wind or the snow underfoot, it was a battle against the invisible forces of heat loss. In the harshest winters, even the toughest men could be brought to their knees by the relentless cold. The human body is like a furnace, constantly generating heat. But without the right protection, that precious warmth escapes quickly. Insulation is what keeps it in, acting as a barrier between the body and the freezing air outside. Good insulation traps air. Air is a poor conductor, so it slows heat loss. The more air you can trap, the warmer you stay. This is why thick, fluffy materials are so effective at keeping us warm. Materials like wool work by creating pockets of dead air space. These tiny pockets act as invisible shields, holding warmth close to the skin and blocking the cold from creeping in. But when wool is compressed by sitting, lying down, or carrying a heavy pack, it loses that air and its warmth. The insulation flattens, the air escapes, and suddenly the cold finds its way in. Soldiers found themselves freezing, even in thick layers, because their gear was flattened and ineffective. No matter how many layers they wore, if the insulation was crushed, it couldn't do its job. The real enemy was compression, which destroyed insulation's power. It was a lesson learned the hard way, as frostbite and hypothermia became constant threats. Understanding this, soldiers realized they needed to protect that vital layer of trapped air. Fluffing up their gear, shaking out sleeping bags, and keeping insulation loose became essential survival tactics. The science was simple. Keep air still and close to the body. Still air acts as a shield, while moving air or compressed insulation lets heat escape. The challenge was making it work with the gear they had. Soldiers had to get creative, adapting their uniforms and equipment to preserve every bit of warmth. This insight sparked a wave of battlefield innovation. Makeshift solutions, from stuffing extra material into jackets to sewing new layers, became the difference between comfort and misery. The fight for warmth became a fight for air. In the end, survival depended not just on strength or courage, but on understanding the science of staying warm. With standard gear failing, soldiers turned to improvisation, especially with paper. Crumpled newspaper, cement bags, and cardboard became makeshift insulation. Stuffed inside jackets and trousers, paper created a chaotic structure full of trapped air, resisting compression better than wool. Soldiers wrapped newspaper around their torsos, adding both insulation and a windproof layer. This simple trick blocked the wind and kept precious warmth close. Veterans taught newcomers to see trash as survival gear. Cement bags became ground sheets, cardboard became extra layers. These battlefield hacks were passed down, saving countless lives. The key was understanding the principle, not the material. Resourcefulness, not regulation, kept soldiers alive. In the cold, knowledge was as vital as ammunition. Wet, cold feet were a soldier's nightmare. Leather boots soaked up water, then froze, causing trench foot and frostbite. The solution? Newspaper again. Soldiers wrapped their feet in paper between two pairs of socks. The paper trapped air for warmth and absorbed sweat, keeping outer socks and boots dry. At night, they'd swap out the damp paper for fresh sheets. This simple routine prevented countless injuries. Soldiers had invented a vapor barrier system, something modern outdoor gear would later copy. Moisture management was as important as insulation. Yesterday's news became a life-saving tool. Adaptation, not equipment, made the difference. Some armies issued a strange-looking mesh vest, just thick string, full of holes. It seemed useless, but it was a scientific marvel. Worn under a shirt, the mesh held fabric away from the skin, creating a thick layer of trapped air. The vest itself wasn't warm, but it forced the creation of perfect insulation. It also managed sweat, keeping skin drier and warmer. Elite units like the commandos used these vests, understanding that air and moisture control were key. While most soldiers improvised, some had gear decades ahead of its time. Sometimes, the simplest science gave the greatest edge. Clothing was only half the battle. Shelter mattered just as much. Sleeping on frozen ground drained heat fast, so veterans built raised platforms from wood, branches, or whatever they could find. Elevating themselves even a foot off the ground made a huge difference. Pine boughs, straw, and cardboard lined floors and walls, trapping air and blocking the cold. Blankets or canvas over entrances kept warm air in and wind out. These makeshift shelters turned holes in the ground into insulated havens. Units that mastered shelter suffered fewer cold injuries and stayed combat-ready. Poor shelter meant frostbite and hypothermia, even without enemy fire. Practical science became a tactical advantage. In winter warfare, shelter was survival. The brutal winters of World War II delivered a lesson that would echo through generations. Knowledge, above all else, was the ultimate survival tool. In the face of relentless cold, snow, and deprivation, it wasn't just strength or courage that kept soldiers alive, but the wisdom they carried and shared. Issued gear often failed under extreme conditions, leaving soldiers exposed. But practical science, quick thinking, and the ability to improvise with whatever was at hand often made the difference between life and death. Veterans learned that a compressed coat was a cold coat. As flattened insulation trapped less heat, they passed this knowledge on, helping others avoid the same mistakes. Dry feet were warm feet, and a single pair of dry socks could mean the difference between frostbite and survival. Simple habits, like drying boots and socks by the fire, became sacred rituals. Sleeping off the frozen ground was essential, as even a thin barrier could prevent the body's heat from being stolen by the earth below. Soldiers saw value in what others called trash, repurposing discarded cans and scraps into life-saving tools. They understood the science behind every trick, turning necessity into invention. Units that embraced learning, shared tips, and adapted quickly suffered fewer casualties. The willingness to listen, teach, and innovate became a force multiplier. This lesson still matters today. No matter the crisis, what's in your head is more important than what's in your pack. Knowledge weighs nothing, but it can save everything. The soldiers' resilience and ingenuity turned the harsh laws of nature into unexpected allies, transforming obstacles into opportunities for survival. Intelligence, adaptability, and resourcefulness, not just equipment, won the fight against the cold, and those lessons continue to guide us in every challenge we face. That's a survival lesson that never goes out of date, no matter how much the world changes.